investigations into matters like, for a reason, Ukraine, China resulted in this.
And the talk was prior to finding out about these charges. Oh, this.
I was saying a lot. I was recording. So part of when we begin to study Caribbean theology, of course, we want to look at our. We talk about our Caribbean being an invention. There's so much to dissect and there's so much to say. But our theology, which is based on a kind of critical thinking that speaks to the challenge and issues of the day. By the way, there's something I want to raise with you guys, but the other student is not here, but Howard is still here. Karen is not here yet. Wait, Howard. Oh, I keep mixing up. I keep mixing up you with the other student. So, but I'm looking forward to do. I want to do a recap quickly about what we discussed because I think last week was very important. And the first part of the class, I think what I want you guys to do is to come up with your own understanding, your definition of theology. And I don't know if you I don't think you were able to do the homework forward about, did you do the homework? The assignment for last week was to come up with a definition of Caribbean theology.
No, sir, but I think I could craft one now. I think I could craft one now in a couple of minutes.
Oh, okay. You want to craft and come up with a definition. Yes. So the first thing I wanted you to do was to come up with a definition of theology based on the discussions that we had in the last class, because in the last class, we started the lecture, and I made some very important points as it relates to coming up with a definition for Caribbean theology, if I could find that. Here it is. Caribbean theology. Is it this one? No, that's the course outline. Oh, and we haven't gone through the course outliners yet, but Caribbean theology dynamics, documents, abortion. Where is it? Oh, here we go. Caribbean theology and the issue of power. Because we said last week that some of the key themes and perspectives within Caribbean theology include, one, we said contextualization, and we talked about contextualization, which was Caribbean theology emphasizes the importance of engaging with the specific cultural, historical, and social realities of the Caribbean context. And we said that it seeks to bridge the gap between theology and the everyday experiences of Caribbean people. We said that liberation theology. The second thing we talked about in terms of key themes and perspectives within Caribbean theology was liberation theology, and which was influenced by the broader liberation theology movement or liberation movement. Caribbean theology places a particular emphasis on the liberation and empowerment of the marginalized and oppressed. We said that it highlights the need for social justice, equality, and the dismantling of oppressive structures in Caribbean society. And the dismantling of, now this particular part is absolutely important, the dismantling of oppressive structures in Caribbean society, because one of the things that we were talking about, of course, that speaks to our social action. It speaks to social activism, activism, the active part, which is kind of interesting in terms of, because there was always this marriage between church and state, always this marriage between the theology and the politics, which especially in Caribbean society, which has inherited that European identity, which is a strong influence of the church. The church still plays a very significant role in society, and also society helps to influence the church. There's a symbiotic relationship. But we talk about liberation theology and highlighting the need for social justice equality and the dismantling of oppressive structures in Caribbean society. And when we talk about Caribbean society, what is the Caribbean society? If we're not just talking about Jamaica, we're talking about the entire Caribbean people and the Caribbean experience. Okay, so it goes beyond just looking at one particular Caribbean nation, but we look at it goes beyond Jamaica, but it includes Suriname, Belize, whatever the case. And there is something that unites the Caribbean peoples together. And there is a recent issue, and when we study Caribbean theology, and if liberation theology is part of Caribbean theology, then liberation theology cannot be divorced from what is happening in society. That is part of the liberation theology came out of the 1940s and 50s and 60s with that kind of activism, nationalist movement, socialist movement, and independence movement, and Pan-African drive, and so on. It was part of an active movement for liberation, for freedom, recognizing the freedom of individuals. And so it came out of all of that. And so I talk about, so our theology cannot be devoid from what's going on in society. And I think we started last week talking about Haiti. But, and I think this is where I really want to raise a very important issue about Haiti today. I want to raise a very important issue as it relates to Haiti, because earlier somebody took me on. Somebody took me on earlier today. Let me see if I could find it, that tweet. Somebody took me on today. Somebody took me on today. And if I could find, whichever, and anyways, I started a Caribbean community. I said, question, is it true that Juneteenth has nothing to do with Haiti or Jamaica? Is it true that Juneteenth has nothing to do with Jamaica Haiti or Jamaica? The truth, and I say to you, the truth depends on one's perspectives, especially if it is myopic and limited, in that it does not go beyond time and space. It does not go beyond time and space. It does not go beyond time and space. Define the law of thermodynamics. But Harris would want us to believe that it doesn't. That Juneteenth has nothing to do with Haiti. Based on his reply to the post I shared on Juneteenth, calling for us to be good Samaritans. The post that I had shared called on us to be what? Good Samaritans. And the idea of this good Samaritan came from the class last week when we were talking about being good Samaritans. Calling for us to be good Samaritans in the fight for justice. That is liberation theology. The issue, okay? The fight for justice. I had posted yesterday via my Twitter, as we reflect and celebrate the emancipation of slavery, leading to universal suffrages and human rights in the US on this Juneteenth. I had posted this. Let's not forget our brothers and sisters in Haiti. Our brothers and sisters. Notice the word brothers and sisters, and I carefully choose my word. No, let's not forget our brothers and sisters in Haiti, still fighting for these same rights that is human. And then I asked them to sign the petition for Haiti. The petition that Caribbean governments should support a Haitian-led solution against foreign interference. And I put the link to the tweet. Harris critiqued in the thread via Twitter, saying Juneteenth has nothing to do with Haiti, no Jamaica. I responded saying, but it does. But it does. In the words of C.L.R. James, and I quote, Fidel Castro and the Cubans are not Black, but their revolution was West Indian. And those aren't my words. Those are the words from C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James, in his book, from Toussaint to Castro, and even in his book, looking at the Black Jake Cummins, he said of, and in this interview, he said of the West Indian, he said of Fidel Castro and the Cubans, of their revolution. It's not a Black thing for them. They're not Black, but their revolution was West Indian. You know, part of theology, part of this liberation theology movement, or recognized, was also part of this Pan-African movement. Part of this liberation theology was a liberation based on enlightenment, based on empowerment of people's empowerment of individuals. But part of the problem with liberation theology is that it runs incongruous with part of orthodoxy, part of the Orthodox faith. Even to the point where there are people who talk about this kind of ultra liberation theology, or extreme, even talking about feminism, Marxism, and extremism. But almost any idea can be seen as extreme or ultra. And something is extreme or ultra when it does not consider anything else. When the idea promotes itself, privilege itself over others to the point of violence, where it would bend others into that ideology. But that was okay, or as if nothing else existed, and promote that particular thing as the best. But of course, so there are those there, but it happens. But of course, whether in orthodoxy, because orthodoxy does the same thing. It is as if it is part of this human nature to promote a particular ideology. But that's not all of you know, you have feminists, but you have ultra feminists. You have liberation theology, but you have extreme and ultra liberation theology. But the thing about liberation theology was a recognition of the other. A recognition of, and not just a recognition, was an acknowledgement of the other. It is giving dignity to other perspective and to other experience. It is to raise the individual. It is to raise the individual towards an empowered self, but not devoid of any spiritual experience, as if the human is above that of God. But there are those who may see that, because talking about when you talk about your view of God, is it a top-down approach or an up or a bottom-up approach? And of course, that based on your one school of thought will determine your approach to theology, especially in terms of postmodernism. But we said that Kant in his history said that history is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstance. But back to the point, we talk, so it's the recognition of, so I said, let's not forget brothers and sisters in Haiti, still fighting for the same rights that is human. Our brothers and sisters, they are still fighting for the same rights that's human. Sign the petition that Caribbean government support a Haitian-led solution against foreign interference. Harris critiqued in the Sun, and of course I talked about what Harris said. And I said that while Harris believed that Juneteenth has nothing to do with Haiti or Jamaica, it's an American thing, I said it does, in the words of C.L.R. James. Fidel and the Cubans are not Black, but their revolution was West Indian. We are all fighting for the same thing. What are we? Okay. Indeed, if one is not free, then none is free. If one is not free, then none is. That is the basis of Pan-Africanism. That is the basis of liberation theology. That is part of the Caribbean experience, where we are fighting for independence, fighting for self-determination, fighting for nationhood, fighting for sovereignty. And it's an acknowledgement of the other. So if the Haitians are not free, then we are not free. If they are fighting for freedom and independence, and we talk about, when we look at the idea of Christian theology, which is influenced by the Judeo-Christian faith or doctrine that talks about sacrifice. And the picture of Jesus on the cross and what Jesus represents. Our Christian theology, and well, of course, Jesus was said to be a Jew, but he went outside of his Jewish community and he took unto himself friends and followers who were Gentiles and of a different race and ethnicity and group, a different kind of people, and went as far as to deny his deity or his divinity. And of course, sacrificed himself in order to bring all men. Read the scriptures and you see what the Christian Bible, or look at, and of course we talk about the picture of how Jews see the problem of the Christian, but the problem that Jews had with the Christian Bible, we talk about that. Jesus is too weak. Jesus does not speak to the experience of the Jewish people. The experience of the Jewish people does not give them, cannot allow them to see a Jesus that is brutalized, and that is not part of their experience. While the Greeks, with their Achilles, could not see a hero that was like the Hebrew Jesus. While now the Christian could not see a Jesus, saw a Jesus that would go as far as dying to raise them up. All these peoples from different generations, different epochs, they have a different understanding of Christ, because as we, like Kant says, history is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstances. What the circumstances, the experience of people, more often than not, give rise to an understanding of their theology, because their theology speaks to, or it is that the ultimate God speaks to people based on their context, based on their experiences, so that each peoples have a particular theology of God, based on how God, in his infinite ways, God who is omnipotent, God who is omnipresent, God who is omniscient, is able to communicate to human beings and to reveal himself in such a way that speaks to the particular human understanding of all things. Yet human beings have sought to privilege that experience which was meant for themselves. Whatever the case might be, then it would stand to reason, then we cannot discount and disqualify as primitive and insignificant the African experience, the African understanding, our African heritage within our Caribbean theology. We can't discount any possibility of Indian and Marooned heritage of part of our experience. But whatever the case might be, what is important about liberation theology and a theology that is Caribbean is to recognize what's a theology within a particular liberation theology that's speaking to the empowered self. If one is not free, then none is free. We are connected as human beings in the fight for human rights and freedoms. In the fight for human rights and freedoms. So the question of, the question is to say, the question is it true that Juneteenth has nothing to do with Haiti or Jamaica? Is it true? That's a question that you guys could ask yourself. And then we start to think about it within the realm of theology, because of course, theology deals with truth. Of course, there was, remember J.E. Adams that had said once when we studied psychology, all truth is God's truth. And we discussed whether or not there can be a marriage between Christianity and psychology. But at one time, there was no, that was not, that was not, at one time, Christianity and psychology was not, they had no love. You could not, you could not integrate psychology with theology. There was a big debate about the integration of psychology and theology. So of course we talk, so Caribbean theology recognizes the brotherhood, we're fighting together. Kierkegaard says, once, well, I won't talk about Kierkegaard as yet. So those were some of the, let me continue with some of the things that we discussed. Where is it? Where am I? I think, okay, there we go. So that's liberation theology, dismantling. So we talk about Haiti. The whole Haiti situation came about with Ariel. Haiti has a de facto president. Haiti hasn't had an election since 2017. The people are fighting for that right to be able to that right of a government by the people, of the people, for the people. When we were fighting for independence, we were fighting for a kind of nation, a nation that was Caribbean, a nation that was of the people who lived there, that was free from foreign interference, a nation that was based on laws and democracy, a nation where people could self-determine, where they could, with universal suffrage and universal rights. And Haiti was one of the first Black country, on the first country to have independence and to be free. And the thing is with Haiti, they didn't get independence, they took their independence. But today, they don't have the people, our brothers and sisters in Haiti don't have the luxury of what we have here, of what other people have in other parts of the Caribbean. They are being denied that, and they are fighting for that right. And in order for that right to be guaranteed, they need brothers and sisters all over the world, including Caribbean, who is part of, and Haiti is part of that Caribbean West Indian community that is fighting for democracy, that help to preserve democracy. CARICOM and Caribbean community and our Caribbean theology is all about fighting for and preserving democracy and nationhood. But what we have is foreign interference and foreign penetration, and people all over the world that is recognizing a de facto government that is holding on to power and preventing its people. And I ask, what if Jamaicans had to live through a political party that's holding on to power 6, 7, 8 years, and they're still in power, no election, and there is no indication of an election, denying that you're right as a Jamaican? And so it has led to gang warfare and other kind of and that has added violence on top of violence. And so we have, that's all. So our theology speaks to that. That's the liberation theology. There's also the third thing that our theology speaks to. The theme is Afro-Caribbean spirituality. And I asked some of you that at this point in the class, when you come to this level, you would have already done systematic theology. I mean, you would have already done introduction to theology, contemporary theology, postmodern theology, digital technology and theology. And then by now you are ready to Roman theology. I don't know if you do that, and so on and so forth. Bible and history and so on. You come to Caribbean theology. We are looking at, okay, based on all that you have studied, what is your understanding of Caribbean theology? And how does it speak to Caribbean experience today and tomorrow? Does it, and okay, and does it, and does, and therefore, and so the question is, as we go through the course, we'll ask, how have your theology been adjusted? How has it evolved throughout this course or throughout your experience? What has been your greatest influence? What is the greatest influence? What influences your theology and why? And of course, I talk about African theology. I mean, why do we, you might ask, why is it that we have to look, why is African theology important to Caribbean? But when you look at Caribbean, we say that the Caribbean is an invention. It's an invention of the 20th century. And when we talk about the 20th century, we're talking about when we talk about the 20th century, we talk about the 1900s up to, okay? The 20th century includes the 1900s. So 19 something is the 21st century, talking about 20 and beyond. So the 20th century is not 2021. The 20th century, we talk about the 1900s, from independence and for that drive to nationhood. But of course, we are going to start from even before that experience, from slavery. But all of that experience, of course, the African experience, because last week we talked about Dottie Bookman and how Dottie Bookman was a very important figure. We talk about voodoo last week, and voodoo is an important what the national religion or an important faith. Voodoo is very important in terms of, and Haiti is known for their voodoo. And we learned about voodoo last week in a little bit better about voodoo, and voodoo is about protection. But voodoo is looked down upon in Caribbean experience, because I mean anything that comes from anything that comes out of our African experience is looked down upon, and we have inherited that. Okay, we have inherited that, and the way we see voodoo today, of course, the way how voodoo is practiced, it is not the practice of voodoo. It's not the original intent of voodoo we're being here, and the same thing goes for Obia. And we talk about, but the practice of some of the ideological tenets of voodoo is contained within Catholicism and some of the standard religions of today, or European religions of today, Christian religion that we have inherited. But yet still, we don't have that appreciation for African religion. We don't have or a Caribbean religion, or anything that is Caribbean that comes from that African ancestry, or that come from us, which speaks to our Caribbean theology and how colonization has created a kind of psyche that we talk about. Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. We talk about, but we have inherited that to the point of privilege, of privileging a particular kind of theology over other. We talk about how we speak in our language. And I think I was having a conversation with Chantel earlier about language. You know, language is important. And we talk about mainline churches, even in our language, the mainline churches. Well, what are the mainline churches? The Anglican, the Catholic Church, the Presbyterian. Those are the mainline. Those churches that come from Europe. But what are the non-mainline churches? Those that come from the Caribbean experience, that is influenced by that kind of, dominated by African behavior. So when we talk about Caribbean theology and that Afro-Caribbean spirituality, it's quite interesting that you have not done. There is no talk about African Caribbean spirituality in Caribbean theology. Okay, but of course, the institution that, you know, I say to you, when you study anything, you study the context, because earlier we talk about contextualization of our Caribbean theology, but we talk about, and I said to you earlier, I went around the bush earlier and talked about that the penetration from without, European penetration, and how the context is important, and the contextualization of our understanding of Caribbean. So the context, the school, so say for example, I say to you, what school what seminar, where are you being trained? When you, okay. So if I say to you, all right, fine, come up with a definition for theology based on what you have understood and your own experience. And your understanding of theology also refer to some sources. What major figure, what influences or theologies have come to influence your understanding of your definition or your interaction of this idea of what theology is? What is your faith experience, and how does that speak to it too? What about your mom and your dad and the community you're in? Okay, what about your understanding of history? But what about challenges to your theology, and how does it affect or interact with your theology? Do you hold any biases to your theology? So now we are going deep, because part of Caribbean theology, like Caribbean thought, is doing critical thinking. We're revisiting our theology, not to discount it, but I said to people, why I used to teach Caribbean, I used to teach apologetics, and I said to people, and I discovered that many people are afraid of apologetics. Do you know why people are afraid of? And I would tell my students in apologetics, do not be afraid to be challenged. Do not be afraid to be pushed. Do not afraid to be questioned. Because if you are afraid to be questioned, that means you are not certain of your of your own truth, of your own perspective, of your own, okay? You are not certain of it. And of course, there are people who said you can't be certain of anything. So fine, so if you can't be certain of anything, why do we have privilege? Of course, we talk about we can't be certain of anything because of that psychological understanding that is also contained within our theology. That is inherited phenomenology, Descartes. I think, therefore I am. A recognition of what can you know. But of course, psychology deals with the mind. Theology goes beyond the mind to dealing with the spirit. But of course, Descartes talked about this dualism, the mind and the body. The mind and the body experience. But where does the spirit, and of course, then we get into a heavy debate within Christendom as it relates to the spirit of the human, which brings about the balance and so on and so forth. But we're going to talk more about that some more. But we talk, so the institution, you are at Caribbean Theology. You're at Caribbean Theology. We're being at Jamaica Theological Seminary. A seminary that was started by the missionary church in Jamaica. So of course, so we have to also study the missionary church in Jamaica. The missionary church in Jamaica, their theology, informs, okay, will also influence their mission. Part of their mission is Jamaica Theological Seminary. Jamaica Theological Seminary, of course, will then have as its outlook a kind of theological training that almost mirrors and represents and promotes a missionary church kind of understanding of theology. And then if you go to UTCWI, the theology might be a little bit different. Of course, you are going to get a course in Afro-Caribbean spirituality if you go to UTCWI, most definitely, okay? But some Bible schools don't have that. But Afro-Caribbean, this Afro-Caribbean spirituality is part of the experience. And so we ask, why is it that the Afro-Caribbean spirituality is not part of the Caribbean experience? So I'm happy I asked that question and Howard responded. So I'm going to change the course a little bit. I mean, I think, no, actually, I don't have to change it because if you look at the syllabus, we are going to deal with Afro-Caribbean spirituality. And part of the reading, I will give you a reading to do which delve into Afro-Caribbean spirituality. And then, okay, and then we will interact with that. I'm going to, before we wrap up this class today, I want to talk with you about, I think I had shared a paper with some of the persons in my Caribbean Thought class. But when you are submitting an interaction paper to me, this is what I want, okay? So as I talk to you now, Howard, about your definition of the assignment I'm asking you to do, it's not a quick assignment, it's not easy. Then you start to think deeply about the assignment, then you're going to say, wait, no, sir, I don't think I can do this assignment right away. Because Socrates says the unexamined life is not worth living. But this examination that Socrates is talking about, it's not surface level. This examination, okay, is a deep metaphysical reflection that speaks to epistemological truth. And within this class, coming out of our Caribbean theology and faith experience with the ultimate. And in a sense, in a sense, we continue to practice a kind of slavery that prevents us from going outside of school of thought or a doctrine or an institutional or institutions. Now we get to the institutionalization of our theology. Because I talk about the key themes in theology. When you look at perspective within Caribbean theology, we talk about contextualization, liberation theology, Afro-Caribbean spirituality. But just as though we in Caribbean thought, we talk about, we visit Michel Foucault that talks about postmodernism, but as a critical thinker that was like Kant and so skeptical of institutions, because institutions helps to preserve social control and social power on establishment. And institution, then how institution, we talk about liberation theology was seen as anti-establishment. Liberation theology was seen as anti-institution. Liberation theology challenged the status quo, challenged the establishment, challenged institutions, because it's about freedom and liberation of self and understand. Because it's difficult. How can you have liberation? And that's why some people could not have a liberation theology and still practice a kind of European theology or Christianity. So some people, which will have led to what the Bob Marley religion or Rastafarianism and so on. Or some African religion that we have in the Caribbean today. But outside of that, we talk about institutions and how institutions exist to control and how institutions help to direct theology, our theology. So part of the challenge of grappling with our Caribbean theology, which is part of revisiting history and deconstructing philosophy and critiquing history which is part of revisiting of our theology, the exercise of this new critical exercise, is to also, sometimes it is difficult to do. And I used to go to the Jamaica Evangelistic Center, at an evangelical church. My father was a pastor as evangelical, and even today there's still this evangelical experience. And some people would look down if you go to any Bible school outside of that particular denomination's Bible school, the institution's Bible school. When you come back, you have to go through hoops still, or you're looked down upon. If your theology, your theology is not well accepted if you are part of a particular faith experience, and you get a theological education outside of that particular denomination. You're either revered in some contexts, and in other contexts, you're looked upon as being suspicious. This is how, if you live in the Caribbean, and then you move and go outside of the Caribbean and come back, then you are seen as, in terms of your understanding of theology, is seen as being corrupted and tainted. Because of and we talk about, it's all about preserving our culture. And we talk about the problem of a general will. We talk about, some people whether or not institutions are good, but at the same time, does it hold people hostage? And of course, it clashes with this liberation theology. But how, if I were to ask one group of people to come up with an understanding of theology, Caribbean theology, and then go to another group within the same denomination, it probably might look the same. But outside of that, Caribbean theology recognizes and incorporates the rich spiritual traditions of the Afro-Caribbean population, including elements of African religions, Christianity, and other practices. It acknowledges the spiritual resilience and creative expressions of faith within the Caribbean context. And finally, this is not finally, fourthly, our Caribbean theology must speak to identity and cultural reclamation. And we talk about this, identity and cultural reclamation. Caribbean theology encourages the affirmation and reclamation of Caribbean cultural identity. It recognizes the importance of valuing and preserving Caribbean traditions, languages, music, and art as integral aspects of Caribbean spirituality. Identity. And yesterday I had the Urban Indian Heritage Society talk about the issue of identity. And I think, at 8:30 tonight, I'm ending the class at 8:30 tonight, because I want you guys to watch the premiere of the video that I'm premiering on our YouTube feed, looking at the issue of heritage, and the issue of identity. And we talk about the importance of preserving identity. We talk about the Jews and how important it was for them to preserve their identity, with how their theology also focuses on that. The Jewish theology focuses on that. And in 1947 or 48, they were able to become a nation again. So we're talking about part of Caribbean theology does that, help to preserve that. Fifth, Caribbean theology recognizes community and communal ethics. Community and communal ethics, that's important, because we talk about ethics and value and morals. Of course, there are universal principles of life that when you go in every society uphold that. It stands to reason. Say, for example, the value of life that's the right to all human being and all life, that's life. And any behavior that is analogous to that questions the ethics of or the rationality of any individual. But of course, there are those who would go to the lens to say that anybody who don't subscribe to a particular religious ideology, then our religion says that we must sentence you to death. You must die. Of course. But I don't know, that's not our theology. Our theology, Caribbean theology is a theology of community. And we talk about earlier, we talk about our theology of, we say, what does Juneteenth have to do with Haiti? We're not talking about Juneteenth because Juneteenth, what Juneteenth have to do with? Juneteenth have to do with emancipation and independence and freedom of a people within the Americas, that was part of the New World, and all of us. And you know, and I said, because of a lack of knowledge, people perish. And when people are exposed to the truth, when you are become more aware, and that's why sometimes people have a problem with your awareness, becoming it. People don't want you to know too much. They don't want you to become aware, too aware. You know, I used to be the chief planner at a company, at a logistics firm in New York. And I used to have a staff, and I had a secretary. And I would tell my secretary, I would take him home sometimes, drive him home on the way home, and we would talk a lot, and I would say to him, don't let people know what you know too much. Don't share too much. Don't reveal too much to people. Don't reveal too much to the people at work, to those who come before you or behind you or your assistant and so on, because when companies know that, or have other people in the department that can do what you can do, then your job is at risk. Your position is at risk. So you don't want that. So I don't want to tell my assistants and my deputies too much, because if I tell them too much, then my job becomes more of risk. Then I am replaceable. I am replaceable. That is a strategy that you think that strategy is not known by. That is a strategy of power.
So, sir, question.
Yes.
Would that be, as I'm looking at it from a different perspective?
Yes.
In the sense that,
yes.
You know, you allowing them to know more gives you more marketability.
No, but I don't want them to know more. I don't want them to know. I just allow them to know just enough, but no more. Okay, because if they know everything that I know, then I become replaceable. So if I am the chief planner, the logistics man who know how to operate the entire system, okay, and they know just about enough, but then my job is protected. I can't be replaced that quickly, because if I am terminated right now, then who will do what I am doing? It will take them a long time, money, and it would have difficult a new system. But if I were to but you understand the point I'm making?
No, I understand now, sir. I'm just understanding.
Yeah,
If there's something that you do that a lot of persons are not privileged to, the know-how or the information to do it. Once you give that information and they now become aware, then you're easily replaced.
Precisely. And it's
Right.
not just a matter of your replaceability, but now your authority is challenged. And not just your authority, okay, now you can't claim divinity. Yes, you can't claim that, you can't claim divinity now, because now you realize that, they're not, the monarchs aren't the monarchs aren't that special. We're all special when you start to read the scriptures. So I said to you, say for example, that is why, say for example, the slaves in slavery, it was illegal, it was a sin, it was a detriment to teach them slaves how to read and write. You don't want them to know how to read and write because you don't want them to challenge your position. You don't want them to challenge your authority. Say, for example, the scriptures was not to translate. I said to the last class, to translate the Bible into the language of the common man was a heinous crime. You people had to go through hoops to convert the Bible first from Latin. I mean, to Latin, then to French first, then to English. The Reformation and the Renaissance and the Reformation period, and then leading to Enlightenment, was a difficult time. As they were, I mean, I talk about serving the world today to serve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was the monopoly. Making popular what we talk about monopoly. One's the ability to monopolize the narrative, to control the narrative, to monopolize or to control information. Part of power is to control. And you even in terms of institutions exist to control, and the way how we categorize people and redefine people and institutionalize people. And I said to you just now, in terms of when you're getting an academic institution, and if you're part of certain faith experience, it is a problem because now you are challenging, you're going to know too much. That's part of the strategy of the 20th century as well. In fact, if you were to study in some Black experience, I was listening to Eddie Griffin, a comedian in the US, and he was doing a comedy show. And he said, you want to scare a black person? He used the NI, in Jamaica, there's not a sin to say nigger in Jamaica, so I'm going to say it. You want to scare a nigger? He said, you want to scare a nigger? You just take them a book, give them a book, and they run. And when I was going to school in Jamaica, at Bridgeport High School, I was seen as a nerd. They call you a nerd and they call you all kinds of names if you are educated or if you read a lot and if you study. And in certain communities, certain experiences, even within our own experience, we look down on education and academic. But the point I'm here making, the issue of control and monopolizing information, and I say to you, the way people go through hoops to control information. Even now we talk about the regulate social media. In what I said in the book I'm writing, I said social media is the greatest victory for social movements in the world. Social media, because it decentralizes information. It decentralizes information. It disperses information. Information is not now hoarded or controlled by only one person. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. But this is important that we think about the whole thing about community. We talk about so part of community is good, but at the same time, it may devolve into a general will it may devolve into control. Okay, away from that same liberation theology. But anyways, so I'm going to wrap 2 minutes. Caribbean and hold on a second. Somebody needs a code from me. But but it must speak to community and communal ethics. Caribbean theology emphasizes the communal nature of Caribbean society and promotes a sense of community, but not to its detriment. And I'm going to add that, not to its detriment. It promotes a sense of solidarity. It promotes a sense of solidarity and collective responsibility. Collective. So collectively, we have a responsibility to collectively we have a responsibility to fight for our brothers and our sisters in Haiti. It calls for a reorientation towards social and economic practices that prioritize the well-being of the entire community. It is important to note that Caribbean theology is a diverse and evolving field, with different theologians contributing their unique perspective. And the works of Caribbean theologians such as Lewin Williams and Garnet Rupert, in the outset, will provide specific insights into our understanding of Caribbean theology within the context of Jamaica and the Caribbean. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting a text on my phone, so I'm not understanding what's happening. But those are those 5 key themes. When you think about when we are finished with Caribbean theology, when we're finished with this course, I am hoping that you will write an in-depth essay speaking to Caribbean theology as a new scholar, as new theologians of the 21st century, as we go into the 21st century, understanding that we are an invention, going into the 21st century with certain assumptions that we have, assumptions that is inherited from our colonial experience, which has not left us, which helped to shape our theology. One of the questions, for example, the practical working of our theology may speak to the issue of our stance on certain things, our stance on period poverty. How have our stance, how has our theology affected our actions and our inaction on matters such as social justice, on matters such as period poverty, in terms of the masculinity of our religion, which pertains, and how that continues to shape? I mean, how does that speak to that? How does it speak to the issue of our inclusivity? How does it speak to the issue of diversity? Because liberation theology and Pan-Africanism and all that, and post-colonialism speaks to diversity and the fight for and all of that. How can we, just as though at the outset in the 1980s and so on, people were talking about whether or not we can integrate Christianity with psychology. Can we integrate Caribbean theology with diversity, inclusion, and the challenges of the 21st century? Issues such as the Me Too movement, issues such as abortion. Of course, one of the things we're going to talk about is abortion, and there's been a lot of debate on abortion. If you look at the Jamaica Gleaner, they was talking about abortion. If you talk about, and if I were to ask you, what is Jamaica's position on casino gambling? They will give you a theological, the policy that Jamaica has adopted, and many Caribbean countries have adopted on casino gambling, and the policy that many Caribbean countries have adopted on 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 no- on abortion. And the policy that Jamaica has adopted in terms of on issues of sex, and the policies that we have, all of those policies, where does it comes from, and it is informed from a theological understanding. Of course, then there's a talk about the separation between church and state. But of course, the Caribbean experience is not devoid from church. But then if it's in the US, there's a separation of church and state. But no, there is actually, they say that there's a separation between church and state, but really there's no separation between church and state, because church is still very important. If you're running for president, if you appeal to anything other than being a part of a church, having a church, a part of the Orthodox church experience, then you can't run for president, or that's a problem. Okay, if you say you're a Muslim, it will get you into trouble. I don't know if you can run. Okay. But anyways, outside of that, the Caribbean theology is much a part of Caribbean thought as our Caribbean thought and the Caribbean theology.
Sir?
Mm-hmm.
Question. Can we talk about Caribbean theology and liberation theology without including European thought? Because in my head, the Caribbean is this amalgamation of all these different groups with different thoughts and different views. So is Caribbean theology Black theology, or is it African theology, or is it more of Black, white, Chinese, Indian? Because where we are as the Caribbean, even Jamaica, we have our motto, out of many, one people. So can we have Caribbean and liberation theology without the inclusion of Europe ideology, Indian ideology, Chinese ideology, and all the various groups that are having their own experience, are having this Caribbean experience? That's my question.
Well, earlier I said to you earlier that we thought we profess out of many one people. But yet, what is dominant within Caribbean theology? We talk about the dominant as against the periphery. We talk about influence, but what is the dominant? There is still a person. My argument and my assumption, my argument, and based on observation and study, is that Caribbean theology is heavily influenced by its European experiences, not necessarily its Caribbean. Of course, the people are predominant. Even today, we are challenging Jamaican heritage or Caribbean people heritage as not only African, but also there is also native or Indian heritage. We are saying that there is a connection with the native people here on the island of the Caribbean. But yet still that has been lost because of the strategy to divide and conquer, the strategy of the Europeans, to wipe out any trace of the original and to bring a new set of people with a new mind, wipe them as well, wipe their mind, and to recreate them as something new, and to recreate the Caribbean into what we have today. But yet still the peoples that occupy the place and the space in the Caribbean, yes, we say that they are comprised of a mixture, and but the African experience, you haven't even done African theology or Afrocentric. What I said to you is there, or anything that is unique to the Caribbean in terms of our theological experience. That is not seen as as normative. That's not welcomed. Even today, Rastas are seen as still part of the fringes. Rastafari religion is still seen as still not as welcomed by many Caribbean, because when you study Caribbean experience, you said, yes, we've had European influence, but that was always the case to remake Caribbean as small European countries. Okay. That has been achieved in a sense, with a little bit of flavor but yet still that African flavor is still not necessarily celebrated, especially when it comes down to our theology and that which comes from Caribbean experience. So that which comes from Caribbean experience today is still seen as secondary to Caribbean. It's seen as part of the fringes. It's not taken seriously. So yes, that has helped to influence Caribbean and the people. But the people in the Caribbean, majority of them are not necessarily European. They have, of course, there's some mix and match with European, but they're the predominant, their African descent, their African ancestry, the African experience, part of that theology, part of that faith, that part of that has been corrupted as being insignificant, primitive, and irrelevant. Now, as you talk about liberation theology was fighting for, it's part of the independence movement. That was part of Caribbean experience. We were fighting for independence. It means we were opposing the status quo, all things that was European, to create our own experience, own politics, own nation, with our own religion, own tongue. So yes, so that means that there will be a pushback against, not only just in terms of the government, but also the ideologies and their philosophies. But that has not been taught. But the independence that we received was gifted to us through ceremonies for the most part, except Cuba and Trinidad and Tobago. But yet there's still that European influence in these. European influence. So liberation theology, is that part of that? Can there be a marriage between Caribbean theology and liberation theology today into the 21st century? I mean, the 21st century, what you have that the Caribbean, what is shaped, the Caribbean today is being penetrated by television, social media, as the Caribbean become much more sophisticated in terms of its communication, access to technology as well. I mean, the proliferation of its transformation into as a tectonic center, the Caribbean. It's slow, but it's proliferating over the last couple of years. So that has also have affected our theology. So to answer your question, yes. So that's to answer the question. Whether or not liberation theology is there a marriage between Caribbean? That is what, I mean, Bob Marley talk about emancipate yourself from mental slavery. A slave, okay. So in a sense, we have inherited a kind of European culture and a kind of European theology. And yes, although we are dynamic and mixed, there is still a level of discrimination towards our Africanness or anything that is original to us. Now, and I will pause here for now. I will pause here for now, and then what we will do is, that was important. That was what we did last week as we contend for a definition and an understanding of a Caribbean that is an invention which has to reinvent itself, and a Caribbean that has been penetrated, and we look at the issue of penetration, who is doing the penetrating, who is doing the penetrating, and who is receiving the penetration. Yes, and that's an important issue of power, an important trope of power. Okay, the issue of penetration. And so when you start to look at the Caribbean and its position within this penetration, Caribbean and its openness, Caribbean and its vulnerabilities, not just in terms of its economics, but in terms of its ideologies, its philosophies and theologies. Okay, the headquarters of theological centers are where? In the US or in Europe. So we talk about can the Caribbean have what we talk about Caribbean autonomy and independence, yet there is still deep connections and an acknowledgement to an authority that is outside of the Caribbean. So how does our theology speak to that? But it also speaks to competitive advantages, because we have a theology that has been inherited from the other, from a former dominant class, which many of these countries and former masters have moved on. They have their theologies have evolved, has been transformed. Okay, or they have a theology that is loose, that allows them to operate, to have a particular kind of economics that allows them to do things that puts them at a competitive advantage than their former colonies, who are now free and independent, who are still holding on to the legacies that they have left them, which informs their practice of economics, which will keep them competitively at a disadvantage. So even we talk about theology, and we talk about our theology must speak to the place and the position, the Black position in the world, the Caribbean position in the world. Could it also stem from a kind of theology that we have? Because when you look at capitalist society, when you study capitalist societies, and when you start to study Adam Smith talks about production, the accumulation of capital coming from hard work. Capitalism and the wealth of nations. And then Max Weber wasn't a theologian. Okay, Max Weber was not, he was an economist or a socio who wrote about socio-political issues. But here is it using theology to inform his economics. Because when you read Max Weber talks about, he presents to you a theological understanding of the economics of Western civilization, saying that the kind of capitalism was one that was Protestant, that was informed by the Protestant faith or by Calvinism or Arminianism or Protestant theology of working hard leading on to salvation. But what was unique about this understanding is that Western societies never really followed a Protestant ideology. This is the critical part of my theory. It never followed no Protestant. I mean, not everybody was, it was Protestant probably in its understanding of all things, but everybody never worked hard. Some people work hard, but the majority work hard, but the dominant class, a few people reap the benefits. So the idea that was taught was that everybody work hard, but no, but there are some people work hard based on the class that you're in, and the way and the way in which society is constructed. According to Stanley J. Grenz and Roger E. Olson in 20th Century Theology, God and the World in a Transitional Age, he says that at its best, Christian theology has always sought a balance between the twin biblical truths of the divine transcendence and the divine immanence. Again, the balance, a balance. So Caribbean does, so when we talk about that's Christian theology, a balance between the twin biblical truths of what? The divine transcendence. The transcendence, a God that is beyond us, but a God that is with us. The closeness of God. A liberation theology was really promoted and revolutionized how we this balance of immanence versus transcendence as it relates to the immanence of God, the closeness of God. In fact, to the point where they bringing down God, seeing God, bringing down God to the human. On the one hand, God relates to the world as the transcendent God. That is, God is self-sufficient. Apart from the world, God is above the universe and comes to the world from beyond. As the Hebrew scriptures so forcibly declare, God dwells in the heaven, God is in heaven, and you are on earth. In Ecclesiastes 5:2, and the seer reports seeing the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted in Isaiah 6:1. However, God also relates to the world as the immanent one. This means that God is present to creation. The divine one is active within the, and this is the liberation part of that theology. And sometimes it embraces that more than anything else. The divine one is active within the universe, involved with the processes of the world and of human history. And Paul emphasized this truth in his well-known speech on the Athenians in the meeting of the, of course, in the meetings of the Areopagus. He said, God is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. In Acts 17:27-28. God is not far, for in him we live and move. For in him we live and move. The related theme of God's Spirit, presence. The related theme of God's Spirit, which is present as the sustainer of creation, is repeatedly sounded in the Old Testament, especially in the wisdom literature, such as in Job and so on. And Jesus himself created the natural processes such as sunshine and rain, the feeding of the birds and the beauty of the flowers, to the agency of his Father, which speaks to give the social action, the active, the immanent part of God. Immanent part of God. So that's part of the understanding of Caribbean theology. Caribbean theology is a marriage and put into clear view this balance between the transcendence and the immanence of God, especially within Christian theology. Especially within Christian theology. And so so what I will do now is I'm going to take a break. I will take a quick break. Let me see who we have, oh, Karen is in the class. Karen, you are here. Welcome. We will take a break.
Well, sir, I even asked you a question earlier. I was talking to you earlier. I don't know if you didn't recognize.
Well, oh, was it you? I mixed you guys up. Karen, you guys sound alike.
I was speaking first, and then Howard was asking you some questions after.
And Howard, come take over. Howard, come take over. Wait, take over. Howard, wait, take over for man. What's up, guys? We're taking a break now. All right, we will take a break. 5 minutes. Okay.
Okay,
By the way,
sir.
go to the YouTube channel and let us watch. I want us to watch that YouTube channel. Chantel, send them the link. Send them the link for that. Can you guys? I want you guys to watch that the premiere of that video. You can go back and watch it from the beginning, but it's premiering right now. Urban Indian Heritage Society is talking about heritage, and I believe that I think that was a very important lecture in Caribbean thought, but and they're doing Caribbean theology. But I think that you might want to know about them talking about connections that we have. Premiering at 8:30. Thank you. We take a break now.
The email group, guys. I just send the link into the email group.
Yeah, we take a break and we come back at 9 o'clock. Please log on to the YouTube channel and start watching that if you don't mind. It's Chantel, okay? And
you did 9 o'clock?
Huh?
You said come back at 9 o'clock?
Sorry. I mean, come back at 8 your time, 9 o'clock my time. I'm in the US. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm in the US. Yeah, man. Okay. And when we come back, we will recap what we did last week because we made some very important points last week. And then Wednesday, we will discuss your definitions of Caribbean theology. You will do all the talking on Wednesday. I will not talk.
Wednesday, Thursday, sir.
Thursday. And I want you guys also to also use your sources. Go to your pastor. Go to your mom and your dad, your grandparents. Go to go through your doctrinal books at church, and so on. And then when you are done, I want you to formulate a definition of Caribbean theology based on all what we have said and based on so on. I want it to be 2 pages. It's going to be an interaction paper. Before this class ends, I will share with you a document about what I want on an interaction paper. Okay. And this course is not a difficult course. We're working together. We call it a session. Okay. We call it a session. So we just cool and chill with it. But we're going to learn a lot. Okay. All right. Okay. Not too much expectations.
Yes.
There's a lot of it, but not too much. You guys will pass the course and we will work together. But I want you guys, when we're done, I want to be able to publish your work in an academic journal. Okay. But let's begin. I want you to utilize the sources because what I want to do is I want to respect your sources. Not just, okay, but I want you to compare your sources, the external with the internal. I want it to be ethnographic. Come from your experience, but from outside of that and interact with them, okay? So your doctrinal books at church, and of course your grandparents and your community, and what else did I say? And of course, and including those perspectives. But so access the video, watch that, guys. We come back at 8 o'clock and we wrap up the class, all right? A recording from the Caribbean Thought class yesterday. We had some guest presenters from the Urban Indian Heritage Society presenting their case, presenting their new research, presenting their concerning Jamaican lineage and the misclassification of urban Indians, and the lumping of Caribbean, of some urban people and West Indian people in this African heritage without paying any homage or to the local, to their any connections to the Taino people, which now we have to reconsider that, especially within critical thinking, and where we deconstruct philosophy and critique history as part of that new thrust to revisit history, a history that has been corrupted and by a particular kind of interpretation that is contained within the dominant. but now we are subaltern people. And I will get to that in a little bit. But there are two things I want to get to before we wrap up class. You will be asked to do weekly interaction paper starting this week. I want you to submit an interaction paper starting this week, especially based on the assignment I presented you. I'm using, and when you present a reference list for your interaction paper, just so you know, I want to know who you are quoting, what sources you're using in your interaction. What sources are you using? And also, I want to see not just sources that you've read, but I want to see sources that you've interacted with. For this course, and based on the nature of this course, we are not going to commit the same crime as other people. This course embraces Caribbean thinking as part of those things that are in the periphery, we bring them front and center. We bring our families to bear front and center and their own experiences and what they have to say. If you listen to American Indian Heritage talking about the whole issue of doing your own history, doing your own genealogical study, reclaiming your own heritage, because validation is also part of restitution and reclaiming. Reclaiming is part of the job of Caribbean theology. So I said to you, not only, right, yes, read the Stanley Grants, yes. Read Transforming Missions if you want. Transforming Missions, I think who was Transforming Missions? It was David Bosch, Paradigm Shifts in Theology of Mission. Because when you start to think about Caribbean theology, the issue of missions will come to bear. And he wrote this book in 1992. And it was quite interesting. It was part of a series. And what was quite powerful, he said that in the introduction, he said, entitled Mission, the Contemporary Crisis Between Danger and Opportunity, between danger and opportunity. Since the 1950s, of course, we talk about, when you look at the coming to be of the Caribbean and the coming of the African deep, but we live in a world that, an ethnocentric world, and part of whole slavery, part of Christian mission, you may ask. And because Columbus and the Spanish and Europeans, they were coming also to Christianize a people. In other words, no recognition of the people's own experience as being normative and valuable, because the Europeans had a religion that was better than others. Europeans were better than anybody else in the world. That's privilege, okay? The Europeans were better, their religion were better, their tongue and everything was better. And if you had something that was good, it becomes part of theirs and reworked into theirs. Not okay, but to the issue of mission, we talk about the Caribbean being an invention in terms of not just our economics and part of our culture with a hybrid mix of different cultures mashed up together, wherein part of that mix is looked down upon as being secondary to the other part of the mix. Whatever the case might be, Caribbean theology cannot separate itself from this mission, because part of Christopher Columbus was that part of the work of Christopher Columbus, of his vocation, was that of a missionary. Part of the European voyager, part of the European navigator and explorer was not just to find gold, but you notice the marriage between the gold and the religion there, you can't dismiss the two, but they were coming to spread religion, they were coming to Christianize, they were going to advance Christian, it was part of Christian missions. And to the issue of missions, even when we talk about liberation theology and the issue of missions and the issue of danger and opportunity, according to David Bosch spelled B-O-S-C-H, David J. Bosch, in the book Transforming Missions, Paradigm Shifts in Theology of Missions, he said, since the 1950s, there has been a remarkable escalation in the use of the word mission among Christians. This went hand in hand with a significant broadening of the concept, at least in certain circles, until the 1950s. Mission, even if not used in a univocal sense, had a fairly circumscribed set of meanings. It referred to one, the sending of missions to a designated territory. Two, the activities undertaken by such missionaries. Three, the geographical areas where the missionaries were active, such as in Jamaica, the Caribbean. Fourth, the agency which dispatched the missionaries. The agencies, talk about the missionary church in Jamaica, the evangelical church in the New Testament church, talk about the different denominational movements in Jamaica, and the missionary work that each of these groups do, okay, as well as helped to create the dynamic mix of denominationalism or denominational theology. But with the agency or the institution which dispatched the missionaries. Sixth, the non-Christian world or mission field, also the center from which the missionaries operated on the mission field. And in a slightly different context, it could also refer to one, a local congregation without a resident minister, a series of special services, blah, 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 so on and so forth. All these connotations attached to the word mission. Other stuff. Okay, sorry. There's more. If we attempt a more specifically theological synopsis of mission within theology from a Caribbean perspective, skeptical perspective, as the concept has traditionally been used, theological synopsis of mission as a concept that has traditionally been used. We know that it has been paraphrased as propagation of the faith, propagation. Notice the word propagation. B, expansion of the reign of God. Expansion of the reign of God. That means an acknowledgement that God is not reigning everywhere. The glory of God. We talk about the glory of God or the reign of God. As if God's reign is, so in other words, the missionary brings as if God is God. We say that God is omniscient. We say that God is omnipotent. We say that God is omnipresent in our theology of the ultimate, the theology of God. Okay, God is than that which nothing greater can be conceived or imagined. God is than that which nothing greater can be conceived or imagined. He is okay. That's a recognition of the immutability of God, or the omniscience of God, the omnipresence of God. All of those come to bear when you think about God. When you talk about Caribbean theology and the Caribbean being an invention, and Christopher Columbus and his missionary work coming to the Caribbean to Christianize the natives, okay, who were said to be primitive. And okay, so he was evangelizing to usher in the reign of God to the Caribbean. But yet God is said to be omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. So if God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient, then is there room for our in terms of a mission, a theology, a Judeo-Christian mission theology of missions that included an understanding of a God, or that goes beyond, that exists beyond the reign and the reality of the Europeans? So that can we believe that there was the experience of God? But missions, the idea of missions, is a recognition that, but now, over time, missions have mission. The missionary is changing. The mission is no longer proselytizing. The missionary is now informing. Is informing, but expansion of the reign of God, conversion of the heathen. So we said that to the heathen, the idea of the heathen. The African was said to be a heathen. The slave was said to be a heathen. The natives were said to be heathens, but the Europeans were not. The founding of new churches. So the church, we talk about the church, the church also, the church in terms of its identity. The church has an identity. Where does the identity of church comes from? It comes from a theology. Now, please remember, we talk about the church. The church was what the church developed a Roman identity the first 100 years. When you study the first 100 years of Christianity, if you study church history, which is part of Christian theology and Caribbean theology, the church plays a very significant role, the community of the brethren. And how we practice. The church is a community. When you talk about church is the ecclesia within Christianity. Is the idea, the concept and the idea of church is the concept of theological concept of the ecclesia, the called out, the called out, the ecclesia. And so they're called out, and that calling is not just a calling up, but it's a particular people with a particular practice. So the church is the outworking, and is the practice of that theological understanding of the experience we have with God. So, but the natives of the Caribbean, there before the 1600s, before the coming of Christopher Columbus as a missionary. We talk about Christopher Columbus as a missionary because his work was twofold. He was a missionary, but he was a discoverer and an explorer. So we talk about, when we talk the idea, talk about mission as the contemporary crisis of mission. That's the contemporary, especially since the 1950s, there has been a remarkable escalation in the use of the word mission among Christians. In fact, when we talk about the word mission, there was one time the word mission replaced the word crusades, because mission was seen to be less, because first crusades, we talk about crusades. When you study church history, the crusade was one period in history where the church, when the church, their evangelism and their mission was seen as a violent attack against other societies and faith, the Muslim faith, in a sense. And even to today, you find that the antagonism, the tension between Muslims and certain religions today, or the Catholic faith and other, stems from a violent period in history, so that even the word crusades represents something what was violent. And to know the word mission, so the use of the word mission, but the use of the word mission does not take away from one, the conversion of heathen, and the idea of who is seen as heathen and who is not seen as heathen. And of course, there were no churches, so the founding of churches and what that means. Now, so of course, that's one of the words that you will have to contend with, the issue of mission. And I won't spend time looking at transforming missions, but for this course, one of the things this course is part of critical thinking as well. It's part of postcolonialism. It's part of Pan-Africanism. It's part of liberation thinking in a sense. But we are not promoting liberation theology in Caribbean theology, because, like Bob Marley said we're not capitalists and we're not Marxists in the film Who's Got the Sheriff. We're not Marxists and we're not capitalists. That's what Bob Marley said. You know what he says? We are Rastas. We're not looking for an economic way out. that is based on a particular side. We're not looking for friends from the east or from the west. We try, okay, we're looking to our own selves. And that is why, okay, and so we look to a religion and a faith and a theology, okay? We don't believe that any rescue comes from outside of us. The rescue comes from within us, so that we can formulate a Christian mission. So now that people talk about missions and missiology, you know, people are looking at mission, even with the rise of participant sociology and anthropology, the way in which we practice theology and missions change, even to the Caribbean and to the rest of the world, where people are now thinking about sociology that dominated our missiology, okay, was a missiology that looked down upon, in the way, even if you look at how missions have evolved today in the world, it has evolved because missions had a heavy-handed approach, okay? An approach that does not recognize and regard the other person. But of course, that comes from, and I said to you, the exceptionality of the faith. An exceptional faith comes from a society with people who exceptionalize their positions over others. Anyways, now let's begin. Let me just segue quickly into and move on from that. Caribbean Theology Lecture 2. Writing weekly, you'll be required to submit weekly reflection or interaction papers. I said reflection. Now, when you do your interaction papers, let me just move this out of the way quickly and minimize this. Now, this particular presentation I'm gonna share with you deals with what I am expecting, and not only that for this class, for any other class, wherever you are in life, and you think about how you interact with material. But I wrote this particular presentation as if I am writing an interaction paper about an interaction paper. So I am interacting with the subject of writing an interaction paper. So my interaction paper, so I am sharing with you how to write interaction papers, okay? Interaction papers. So this is writing weekly interaction, but I am going to present it to you as if I'm writing an interaction paper. So my interaction paper to you this week is a presentation on writing interaction paper. So I'm interacting with the subject. Now, title, interaction paper. It could be another topic you're dealing with, Caribbean Theology, reflections on weekly material, whatever the case is. Abstract, this one-page interaction paper, or this interaction paper, aims to reflect on the weekly material covered. So when you write an interaction paper, this interaction paper aims to reflect on the weekly material covered in a course, on whatever the subject is. Utilizing, of course, you won't say that, but utilizing APA style, American Psychological Association style of writing, double spaced. Each week, students are required, you'll be required, to include at least one source, unless instructed otherwise by the lecturer. Say, for example, I'm telling you in this in this paper that you're working on now, it's an interaction paper to define Caribbean theology, but outside, but based on the foregoing and the conversations we're having about the key themes and the challenge of Caribbean and the invention and so on. But I'm going to ask you, please check with your mom, check with your dad, include them in your interaction on the subject. Check with your church and your doctrinal documents and so on, and your pastors and so on and so forth, your mentors and stuff, those people who have been very influential in your life, or how you can trace and come to grips with your theology. But include a source. The primary objective of the assignment is to encourage critical thinking and engagement with the course material, fostering a deeper understanding of the subject matter through reflection. Students can explore questions, concerns, and personal insights gained from the material, contributing to an active learning process, especially with the fact that we don't have a regular class. We only have 3 students in the program. Okay, so therefore the interaction paper is paramount. I will email this to you guys. Just remind me to send this to the students. Transfer. Now, introduction. So your interaction paper has an abstract, and then there is the introduction. The interaction paper serves as a platform for students to engage with the course material on a weekly basis by providing an opportunity for reflection. Students can delve into their thoughts, questions, and concerns regarding the content covered, following APA style guidelines. The paper adheres to double spacing and incorporates at least one source per week unless otherwise stated. I'm repeating myself. But the body, so you don't have to have the abstract will have a question or okay, and then the introduction introduces the topic. The body, 1, weekly material overview, provide a brief summary of the key concepts, theories, or ideas covered during the week. This section serves as a foundation for the subsequent reflection. And I'm going to ask you to read like Lewin Williams and Garnet Roper. Or I would have expected you to read Garnet Roper and Lewin Williams, and you may have an understanding as to, because Garnet Roper has a definition of theology, which I love. It's beautiful, it's powerful. And I think in this course outline, I asked you to read certain chapters and sections, okay? So you can interact with them as well, but or use that to inform your definition. This section serves as a foundation for the subsequent reflection. Secondly, personal reflection. In this section, discuss your thoughts and reactions to the weekly material. Did it challenge any preconceived notions? Did it align with your prior knowledge? Elaborate on specific ideas or examples that stood out to you and explain why they are or why they were. Again, within the body, the first part could involve a weekly material overview, provide a brief summary of key concepts. Then the second part is personal reflection. Discuss your thoughts and reaction to the weekly material. The third one is questions and concerns. Address any questions or concerns that arose from the material. That what aspects were unclear or in need of further clarification. Expressing these concerns, I will tell you, will help to deepen your understanding and encourages class discussions for further research. And this is very important. I'm going to send this to you so you can read and reflect on it, and as you start to think about your weekly reflection paper. Okay. And sometimes the reflection paper, I may ask you a particular question to deal with, or you may go off on a tangent, but still stick within the reflection, reflecting on the concept and the themes and anything that jumps out of you within the first 2 weeks of that particular. But every week I need a reflection paper. It could be something that you create from what, based on the theological concept raised, or it could be based on something specific. Like within the first 2 weeks, we are contending for a definition of Caribbean theology based on our conceptualizing of the course and the challenges and the problems, recognizing Caribbean as a place and a people and with opportunities, okay? With hybrid people, with mixture, okay? People of African descent with European blood, and now we're hearing of native ancestry, where part of that ancestry has been negated. If not negated, it has been, it devolves into the periphery or part of the taboo. Why? Anyways, expressing these concerns helps to do what? To deepen your understanding. And finally, in this section, application and relevance. Reflect on the practical, this is very important. Reflect on the practical application and relevance of, because you remember earlier when I was talking with you guys, I asked about how does this affect our theology? How does it affect policy decisions that Jamaica and the Caribbean make? In fact, and how does that extend to other issues such as our socio-economic and competitive advantages? And you notice how I'm speaking to you as a theological student, but utilizing economic issues as well? Because as a student, that I am an interdisciplinary student, because the world is complex and dynamic. You notice how the practical outworkings, we're not limiting it, but we're looking at society today and looking at what? Looking at the Black position. What's the Black position? The Black position of lack, of backwardness. Nothing Black, no good. And so on and so forth. Yes? And our competitive advantages are affected by our theology. But anyways, that is but you may challenge that. What I say is not gospel. My job is to facilitate discourse, but to develop a practical outworking of our theology. But of course, we will do, there's a class I will do with you on African theology and spirituality, which is very important, because now I understand that you have done systematic theology and the other theology, but you have not honed in on the African experience of that, and not only that, but nativist theology. So we will spend a whole week on that, so that now you can bring that to bear in your theology. We will spend some time to do that, and I will invite somebody from the African perspective to present, and one from the Indian perspective to present. So not this, in a week after next, we will have a presenter that will spend some time to journey with us, okay, to go deep within this particular aspect of the Caribbean experience, so that now you can have a more complete experience of that, because we're not going to shun that in this class. And okay, now, so we said that application and relevance, reflect on the practical application and relevance of the weekly. And when you notice, when I present and when I speak, there's a lot of practicability. I'm always talking about the experience of Caribbean, the experiences of people, because I'm a student, your professor is the person facilitating the course is a student of liberal arts and liberal studies. And what does liberal arts and liberal studies lift up, which is part of the humanities? It lifts up issues of ethics and human value. And this speaks to the issue of ethics and value. How we value things, the valuation of things. Our liberal arts and our liberal studies is informed at times by our theology. But how does it relate to real world scenarios or personal experiences? And sometimes it is the real world experiences and scenarios that clashes with our theology. Say, for example, the issue on abortion. The issue on abortion, I want to know, how does your theology, as you interact with this, how does your theology speak to the issue of abortion? What are your views on abortion? In fact, I might ask you to do an interaction paper, or in fact, the assignment that we're doing over the next 2 weeks, which is formulating and interacting with the study of Caribbean theology, in contending for Caribbean theology that speaks to Caribbean experience, drawing all our experience, our personal experiences to bear, both that internal and external. But real world experiences speaks to, say, for example, when you look at the Bible, and there's a part, if you look at the prayer of the Our Father prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. The Bible says, give us this day our daily bread. But there's a part that in our Father prayer, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. There's a part that says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lead us not into temptation. There's a part that says, but deliver us from evil. Now there's a part that says, for thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. There are many people that they're finding manuscripts where that was added. And if you read history, European history and the history of kings and so on, and of course the King James Bible, we talk about it, King James didn't write the Bible, but he influenced it. He even went as to adding part to it. For thine is the kingdom, the power and glory forever. But there are times when people say, for example, if we study Augustine, we will we will revisit Augustine this week on Wednesday when we look at the Iliad and Plato and the Phaedo and look at the foundations of knowledge. We will be on Wednesday. We will look at the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith. And as we begin to train Caribbean theology, beginning with Western civilization, starting from Mesopotamia and looking at Homer in the Iliad and Hesiod's Theogony, moving on to Augustine and Aristotle, Plato and Socratic literature, and how that has helped to develop the faith and our philosophy and how that philosophy informs our theology. But the issue of abortion is an issue we talk about. So if I ask you to do, so you could use the issue of we talk about developing you could use a theology. How does your theology speak to abortion? Example. Let's put it into perspective. Abortion. Abortion is illegal because it is a sin to commit murder, and abortion is tantamount to committing murder. Now, there are those who say, no, that takes away from the rights of the woman. Okay, it takes away, but the Caribbean, what is the Caribbean perspective? What is the law in the Caribbean? Where does that law come from, you think? Is it a historical law? What theology informs that law? That we're getting into deep stuff now. Okay. What theology, or is it a theology that informed? Because now the issue, of course, our theology speaks to the issue on life. But does it speak to when life happens and how it happens? Or are we stretching our theology? So they are saying, okay, the Bible informs our theology, but the Bible is an amalgamation of human experiences from human nature within the varieties of human nature and circumstances, what's happening in the period and so on and so forth. But the issue of abortion, they said, oh, it speaks to the issue of human rights. But of course, within our theology and the Caribbean, it goes beyond. Part of human rights should not violate our biblical and theological, our biblical directive as informed by our theological understanding, which is to preserve life. The ultimate is to preserve life. But of course, there are those now yes, so that we believe in the preservation of life, but abortion is not taking life. So now some people have redefined when life happens in order that their theology is not affected by this particular activity. So there's some people, so in a sense, the practical is so. But you want to relate. So that is part of the relationship when you start to think about your theology and relating it to the practical. It's not easily said than done. In conclusion, the interaction paper provides an avenue for students to actively engage with the course material through reflection. By incorporating APA style and adhering, and I notice I keep saying APA style because I say that because some people give me reflection paper like as if they're writing a post or a note. Yes, but I want it to be double spaced. I want it to, if you use a quote, reference it. If you have a conversation with Mass John, you include Mass John today, a discussion with Mass John, but I want to say, what did Mass John say? And okay, when did he say it? Okay, but do you want to, we want to hear what and when did he say it? Which day did he say it? You want to be able to reference that properly. By incorporating APA style and adhering to double space, the paper follows standard academic formatting. Each week, students are expected to include at least one source again, unless otherwise instructed by the lecturer. The paper's structure encompasses an overview of the weekly material, personal reflections, questions and concerns, and considerations of practical application. So Caribbean theology is part of the practical application of one's theology. But of course, we will contend for an African theology and spiritual movements. Through this process, students can enhance their comprehension, critical thinking skills, and contribute to a more interactive learning experience. Okay. And I will stop share there. So that is important. Now, we are going to wrap up the class here. We will end here. This is where I'm going to end the class. But what I wanted to do, I wanted to reflect on what we did last week. I don't know if we have time. Class finishes at 10 o'clock. I wanted to go over, but what I will do is, let me see, where is that document? Unpaid, what is it called? It's called Caribbean Dynamics of Discourse, Conversational Themes in a Dialogic Exchange. I will explain, I will begin by doing this on Wednesday then. I will review what we did because this is important. I called it the first lecture that we did, or the first discussion we did, it wasn't a lecture, I'm not going to call it a lecture. I call it Dynamics of Discourse. That's how we contend for Caribbean theology, through discourse, but the dynamics of it. So the dynamics of discourse, conversational themes in a dialogic exchange. And so I wanted to recap Caribbean Theology session 1, and I entitled it Conversational Themes in a Dialogic. You can go to Wikipedia and type in dialogic. But I don't have much time, so I won't explain dialogic. But contending for Caribbean theology through what? Dynamics of discourse, utilizing what? Conversational themes in a dialogic exchange, especially because we're not doing a necessary a class per se. We will call this a dialogic. We will call it conversational themes in a dialogic, lifting up important concepts and parameters that we must meet in the Caribbean theology. So I wrote an academic article reporting when I was at University of Penn and at Georgetown doing my doctorate. One of the things that we did was each week a student is designated to write an interaction paper summarizing the main themes and concepts of the exchanges and the discussions in the class, interacting with some of the papers and the theories that we did. Every week, each person had to do that. And in a sense, it was a dialogic. So what I did was to put it into practice. I found it quite unique and a great way for students to learn and to develop and expand their thoughts. And each week, each student had to do that. So the first week I did it for you guys. And I created and I have an abstract. Every time I write, I have an abstract. Abstracts are very important. And in the abstract, I introduce the topic, because an abstract is like a preface. So in if you're writing a book, you have a preface. The preface could contain the abstract. Sometimes the abstract is short. My abstracts sometimes are long and complex, but I will tell you, society is not complex. You have to unpack it. But so I begin by saying this academic journal article, because I will make this into an article journal, presents a comprehensive summary and analysis of a dialogue among students at Jamaica Theological Seminary in Caribbean Theology, which included Reverend Renaldo McKenzie, lecturer, Chantel, lecturer's assistant, Rolians, Caron. The conversation spans multiple topics in Caribbean issues, ranging from historical events to socio-political issues requiring theological considerations. Theological considerations that is Caribbean and from a subaltern view. Notice a subaltern view. The discussions marked the opening conversations in Caribbean theology. As we seek to develop a theology that is uniquely Caribbean, that speaks to the challenges, hopes, and dreams of Caribbean. The dialogue reveals significant themes related to misinformation, decolonization, Haitian democracy, liberation movements, privilege, power, and yes, the water crisis in Jamaica, and the political divisions that thwart any result to the crisis and other challenges of Caribbean. The discussions provided insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential implications for societal progress as we push the arguments to their logical end by critically revisiting history, which is what we will do in Caribbean Theology. The discussions provided insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges. Again, the discussions provided insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential implications for societal progress as we push the arguments to their logical end by critically revisiting history. This academic journal article summarizes a thought-provoking dialogue between the participants. The dialogue was useful, and we delved into a range of topics, providing insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential implications for social change and their potential, let me say this again, and I'm going to wrap up this class in about, give me like 5 minutes to wrap up. I want to share my screen with you. Caribbean Theology. There we go. Sure. And I'm going to share this document with you. When I share this document is only for you. It is not for anyone else. It's not for anyone else. This document is only for you. Okay. So I continue by saying the dialogue reveals significant themes related to misinformation, decolonization, Haitian democracy, liberation movements, privilege, power, and the water crisis in Jamaica. I think Keron brought up the water crisis, Haitian democracy, liberation movements, privilege, and power. The water crisis in Jamaica and the political divisions that thwarts any resolve to the crisis and other challenges of Caribbean. Now, the discussion provided insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges, the dynamics of conversational exchanges. We're talking about pushing things to their logical end, into the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential implications, and their potential implications for societal progress as we push the arguments to their logical end by critically revisiting history. The academic journal article summarizes a thought-provoking dialogue between the participants. The dialogue was useful, and we delved into a range of topics, providing insights into the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential implications for social change. In fact, after the conversations, we were moved to compassion and action as the student relented and decided to sign a petition that has been established to bring awareness around the Haitian crisis and to rally support for a Haitian-led resolution that require CARICOM to not support any international peacekeeping mission and the de facto government currently leading Haiti. Keywords. What are the keywords? 1, discourse analysis. We will do a lot of discourse analysis. We will do discourse analysis. Because it is by doing discourse that we will sometimes come to, when you, okay, say for example, talk about dialogic. When you look at Plato in the Phaedo and the way in which the philosophies were developed from dialogue through logical exchanges between persons. That is part of what we will do in this class. Oh, sorry about that, guys. So discourse analysis is one of the things that we will do. Misinformation, decolonization, Haitian democracy, liberation movements, water crisis, unity, social change, critical thinking, and Caribbean theology. Now, And so what I did, so I will share this paper with you, and in it we'll look at the introduction, where the paper delves into a dialogue between the persons in the class, among the persons in the class, examining the various topics discussed and their underlying implications. The analysis aims to shed light on the dynamics of conversational exchanges and their potential influence on social exchange. Secondly, key themes: misinformation, correction. The conversation initiated with the correction of an erroneous statement. We talked about that, clarifying that what happened with Jean-Bertrand Aristide, he was abducted and not assassinated. Decolonization and socio-political influence. We discussed the influence of colonial masters in Jamaica and the broader Caribbean region. The dialogue highlights the ongoing struggle for decolonization, exploring its implications on social structures. Again, exploring what? Its implications on social structures and governance. 4, Haitian democracy and self-determination. The conversation emphasizes the importance of supporting Haitian democracy and allowing the Haitian people to determine their own governance. This theme underscores the significance of self-determination and challenges external interference in the political affairs of Haiti, and then we move from that into 5, liberation movement and theological consideration. Discussions in the dialogue touch upon liberation movements and their historical significance. The participants reflect on what? The intersection of theology and social movements, providing insights into the role of faith in advocating for justice and equality. 6, environmental concerns. The water crisis in Jamaica emerges as a focal point, highlighting the urgency of addressing environmental challenges. The conversation underscores the need for sustainable practices and collective efforts to combat the detrimental impact of water scarcity, and how our theology speaks to a politics that transcends political disenfranchisement and enfranchisement towards a broader issue of communal responsibility to each other. 7, unity and societal change. By the way, Karen, you see how I interacted with your thing on water? You see how I interacted with it there? 7, unity and social change. The participants expressed concerns about the lack of unity among the Jamaican people. That was stemming from number 6, particularly regarding matters of justice and good governance. They acknowledge the potential for a new generation to drive transformative change and foster unity among diverse communities, which is part of our Caribbean theology. And that is why we ended with number 8, Caribbean theology. What is Caribbean theology? Caribbean theology seeks to address this based on number 1 to 7. We ended last week with a definition of Caribbean theology, which we started with this week. It seeks to do what? Address the spiritual, social, and economic challenges faced by the Caribbean people. It recognizes the region's history of colonization, slavery, and ongoing socio-economic disparities. And notice I said socio-economic disparities, which may come from a theology that keeps us backward and uncompetitive, and seeks to offer a theological response that speaks to the lived experiences of Caribbean people. Some of the key themes and perspectives within Caribbean theology include, that we have already said at the beginning, we are closing the class, so we are rehash it by saying 1, contextualization. Caribbean theology emphasizes what? The importance of engaging with the specific cultural, historical, and social realities of the people, of the context. Okay, it seeks to bridge the gap between theology and the everyday experiences of Caribbean people. Bridge it, not force it, as if you're forcing a needle into, forcing a cow into a needle. 2, liberation theology, influenced by the broader liberation theology movement, places a particular emphasis on liberation and empowerment of the marginalized and oppressed. That's okay, and out of that you have social democratic movements and so on. It highlights the need for social justice, equality, and dismantling of oppressive structures in Caribbean society. 3rd, Afro-Caribbean spirituality, We talk about where is that? Where is that in our theological training here at the Jamaica Theological Seminary? It recognizes and incorporates the rich. Notice I said rich, but in many of our conversations, that part of our experience is not seen as rich. Okay? But Caribbean theology doesn't do that. It incorporates the rich spiritual traditions of the Afro-Caribbean population, including elements of African religions, Christianity, and syncretic practices, and acknowledges the spiritual resilience and creative expressions of faith within the Caribbean experience of context. Say, for example, the Rastafari movement was a response, was a resilient response, okay, was a creative expression of faith within the Caribbean context. That's what it is. But even when within the religions and the Christianity and the kind of religion that we have today that is borrowed from a Eurocentric view, in some senses it has been retransformed, or it has evolved in a kind of practice, a kind of liturgy, okay, that speaks to our dynamism, that speaks to our movement. So in a sense, it has evolved. But some people, there are still those who believe that, who call that evolution, as that some people who look down on that evolution, because now we come up with mainline religions as against non-aligned or non-mainline religions or denominations. They are okay, because it's non-mainline, and because it has evolved from the norm, from the status quo. Number 5, community and communal ethics. Caribbean theology emphasizes what? The communal nature of Caribbean society. Communal, and we talked about, and we earlier talked about a gentleman who critiqued me, who attacked me, who challenged me for saying that Juneteenth has nothing to do with the experiences of Haiti and Jamaica. Why am I bringing it up? Talking about emancipation. But then when you talk about, but it goes without saying, and as academics, we are, Plato talk about philosopher kings. I mean, I don't claim privilege, but in a sense, it is we who must bring light to where there is darkness. Because there are those who believe that, okay, or there are those who don't, we are moving away from thinking in terms of brotherhood and sisterhood. It is even within Christendom and within scriptures that we talk about the Good Samaritan and the issue of martyrdom and Jesus sacrificing. Yet our theology have no room for that. It is the issue of Pharisaicalism, which is a socio-economic issue, an issue of bureaucracy. Pharisaicalism comes front and nature, do as I say, but not as I do. Yet, so our Caribbean theology recognizing traditions and languages, preserving Caribbean traditions and languages, music and art as integral aspects of Caribbean spirituality. Again, Caribbean theology encourages the affirmation and reclamation of Caribbean cultural identity. It recognizes the importance of valuing and preserving Caribbean traditions, languages, music, and art as integral aspects of Caribbean spirituality. Community and communal ethics. Caribbean theology emphasizes the communal nature of Caribbean society and promotes a sense of community, solidarity, and collective responsibility. It calls for reorientation towards, notice I say reorientation, towards social and economic practices that prioritize the well-being of the entire community. It's important to note that Caribbean theology is what? A diverse and evolving field with different theologians contributing their unique perspectives. The works of Caribbean theologians such as Lewin Williams and Garnet Roper provide specific insights with which to begin to understand Caribbean theology within the context. Finally, and we end here with this class, the course this semester will include my contributions and thinking surrounding this topic and the issue of power and privilege. This is vital as Caribbean theology is a complex and multifaceted field of study that explores the intersection of spirituality, culture, and the unique historical experiences of the Caribbean region. I said that is part of the Americas, which is part of Western civilization. It seeks to understand and address the issues of power, privilege, and status that have shaped Caribbean society and its theological landscape. And of course, I continued, and then we went. It's a 14-page document, which I will try and summarize and send it to you, or maybe I send all of it to you, but you cannot use it you cannot share it with anyone. Okay, it's just for you guys, for your notes and so on and so forth. And we will stop here today. Okay, that's it for class. Okay, any questions as we wrap up?
No, sir.
Any questions?
We'll ask our question Thursday.
Great. Just remind me that I need to send you the thing on the presentation on interaction. Did I ever send you that before?
I haven't gotten anything yet, sir, in my email. I'll check though.
Okay, so I will send you that, and you may find that helpful not only for this class, but for other classes that you might be taking up. We follow that. Yeah, okay. So you can utilize that. And the second thing is for you guys is nope, I'm not putting you under any pressure. Okay. But what I would like for you guys to do to read the how to write interaction paper, begin working on the exercise, watch the previous class and this class. This class, we're going to make it available to you guys on the video as well. And I will send a copy of the summarized version of the class, of this class and the last class. Going forward, I'm going to ask I will deputize each person to be responsible to do a summary on interaction and to bring it to the class and share it, just as I just, okay? But that's not now, I'm further on, okay? But that's about it. Thank you, guys. We will end here. I hope you please, but I have a Twitter page participating. I have a Caribbean Diaspora Twitter page, community page. Join the conversations, develop your writing, start tweeting and getting involved in academic conversations and discourse and reading widely about different things and so on. You have your work cut out for you in terms of go to your churches, and you guys going to find it quite interesting, this participant of this research, this interaction research, when you go to contend with your people and with your churches. So I'm looking forward to that, and with your pastors and so on and so forth. I will send you a copy of this tape so that it will give you more direction. It may not be ready tonight, but it may be ready tomorrow or first thing Wednesday morning. All right.
All right,
bros. All right, everybody. All right,
bless you, sir. Bless you, sir.
Yeah, man, brothers and sisters in the faith, walk good. I pray that God will keep you. I pray that God will protect you. I pray that God will surround each of us. I pray that he will grant us his favor. And I pray that we will be responsible, that we will be good Samaritans to people we'll meet. Bless us financially and empower us so that we can empower others. Bless us financially so that we can share our finances with others. And Lord God, I pray that those of us who have issues, whatever, the people in Haiti, Rolian is not here today, and I think he is still nervous. Many people in Haiti are afraid. They don't have the kind of freedom to talk boldly in front of the camera like some of us do. So we know that Haiti have a problem when people can't talk boldly about things. We pray, Lord God, that you will protect the Haitians, let them come together, bring democracy and unity in the name of Jesus. We tell you thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, guys.
Bless you, sir.
Yeah, man. Peace. What good.
Yeah, take care.
Yeah, man.